right. Welcome back to those of you who were sharing their memes. I hope you all had a bit of a giggle. And also welcome to our fellow students who are listening to the recording. So welcome to week 2 of the Learning Forum. So let's have a chat about observation. So when you go out on placement, you will be observed and you're going to be evaluated by your supervising teacher. You're also going to be carefully observing and evaluating their practices and approaches. So as a participating or a practicing teacher, you will also be involved in peer observation. Research actually supports that peer observation helps teachers to build their capabilities and also importantly to develop a shared understanding of what they think effective classroom practice is. So again, we're coming back to our community of practice. So peer observation, it also allows teachers to build their skills in giving and receiving feedback. So I'd like some of you to share what you think some protocols might be, considering what you might need to consider when you're observing teachers. Does anyone have any ideas? Unmute your mic and you can share.
I've actually already done a observation session over at another university for a similar degree. And one thing that we really took note on was the different ways teachers went about, I don't want to say controlling, but organizing their rooms, and vastly different methods for different subjects sort of thing. But that was the main thing we focused on. And there was some pretty big differences from person to person.
And so when you observed something that you didn't necessarily agree with, when you were observing your supervising teacher, what did you do? It's Jake, isn't it?
Matt.
Matt, what did you do, Matt?
We kind of just recognized how it affected the student, because even though it might have been not a way that we would have done it, sometimes it still had a positive effect on the student sort of thing. And the student and the teacher did have relationships that, you know, we had only just been introduced with sort of thing. So it was kind of more just seeing the effect of it rather than critiquing it immediately.
Yeah. Anyone else like to share?
You would have to be pretty professional about it, and there's a time and a place to give feedback if that's what you're going to do, instead of undermining what she's doing or what the teacher's doing.
Yeah, no, good point, Frank. Very good point. I think one of the things that we really need to focus on, something that we need to remember, is using respectful and objective language. So stating what you actually see and what you hear rather than actually making those judgments. Would you agree? Yeah, and I think that can be quite a difficult thing to do, especially when we're starting off as a pre-service teacher and even moving into being a teacher as well. So that respectful, objective language. And I really want you, when we're discussing the 3 stimuli, or especially the 2 with the clips that we looked at earlier on, I really want you to consider the language that you're using and trying to not make judgments. Those teachers aren't actually here to tell us why they use those particular practices. So it's really important that you be fairly open-minded. Okay, so our first stimuli, this was a lovely one. So this was a clip of a pre-service teacher in a very early placement. So she planned and implemented a small group activity. And as I said before, small group activities can be really tricky. So she actually did a fabulous job here. So if you are watching the recording of this Zoom, this is the time for you to pause now and watch the clip, and I want you to note down 8 actions that you observed. So pause and note down 8 actions. So for those of you already in Zoom land and you've watched the clip as instructed, what were some of those actions that you noted when you were watching the clip? Who would like to go first? Jake.
Who's going first? I
No?
can.
Yeah.
I noticed how she was directing the children's attention by getting them to point at the words, because there was one little boy who was just all over the place and just, you know, without being disrupting the whole group. She's just, you know, oh, point with your finger, point with your finger. She kept on saying that a couple of times, which I think that was,
oh, yeah, that's great. That was clearly a strategy that she was obviously introducing to the group, do you think, Paula?
Yeah, for all of them, actually. She ended up doing it for all of them because they weren't, just to get them back focused on the task. Because this one little girl was really, she was reading and the other guys were just sort of sitting there, but she needed to occupy them so they wouldn't get bored. Yeah.
So what you're saying is that she was differentiating for those students, and she was really good in that she focused on the learning rather than the behaviour. So the behaviour of the little boy, it wasn't really disrupting the group in any way. So she didn't stop and tell him to, you know, stop what you're doing. You've got to listen. She used her non-verbals to direct him and to make the focus on the learning rather than making a big deal out of the behaviour. So that was a really good observation, Paula. Thank you so much.
Thanks for putting that into words.
No way. Yeah, that's my job. Okay. Anyone else noticed something that the pre-service teacher, the practices that she was using? You there? Okay, well, I will, anyone else? Ashley, Tennille, Susie?
I can go.
Thanks, Tennille.
She was provoking discussion between the children, encouraging them, listening to their input, giving instruction, asking questions. They were some of the ones I put down.
That's fantastic. Anyone else? Thanks, Tennille.
Should sort of prompt the students as well. Should notify when the question had come up, but never actually give them the answer to it, just kind of prompted them in the right direction.
That was a really good observation. So she was really encouraging those students to think for themselves, wasn't she? She was trying to encourage them to come to the conclusions about what the activity was and the learning, rather than giving them all of the answers themselves. I really like that strategy that she used. And another thing that I noticed as well was her use of positive reinforcement. That was something that really shone with this particular teacher. Those really clear instructions and positive reinforcement. And she also, of course, considered safety, didn't she? Making sure that the scissors were out of the way. So using students' names, that was another one, especially not just in early childhood, but across the board in primary and secondary, really being able to use those, getting to know the students and using their names. Okay, we might move on to the second stimulus. So this was something completely different. This was a lesson plan. So this was from a pre-service teacher in a third year placement, so a bit more advanced. Any comments about what you observed with the lesson plan? What were the practices and the purposeful actions that you noted the teacher was planning for?
She actually identified the curriculum really well.
She did.
And then
we're assuming it was a she.
And expressed the learning intentions.
She.
And put the learning intentions out very clearly.
Yeah. So the term WALT was used. So they're the objectives or the learning intentions. And so that is, we are learning to WALT. And this is something that you will come across in your teaching environment, especially in the primary school setting. In the secondary setting, they will probably be referred to as learning intentions or objectives. Some teachers, old school teachers, will probably use the term objectives. And WILF, does anyone know what WILF is? Walt and WILF? You might remember from school. No? So WILF, they're the outcomes. We call those success criteria. So that's what I'm looking for. And teachers will often display those on what we call a learning wall. So they'll be clearly outlined for the students. So the teacher will verbalize them, and they will also have them visually displayed in the learning environment. Anything else? What about this hook? What do you think a hook is?
I actually had a look on the teaching strategies. I think you had it in the power on the blackboard, and hooking the interest of the class, of the students.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Well done, Paula. Thank you. So yeah, it's to get the students' interest, and it often also establishes any prior learning as well that the teacher would take into consideration. So this teacher has put a huge amount of effort into this particular lesson plan. And I guess as a first year student, you wouldn't be putting this much detail in, I guess, depending on your supervising teacher. But generally, you know, this is a bit more of an advanced lesson plan. So we talked about the objectives and the outcomes and the hook. Anything else that you noticed about it? I'm going to move on to the next slide so you can see the second page. Anything else that you note? What about Paris? Was there anything there that you can note, Paris?
Yeah, I'm just trying to, I downloaded the wrong learning forum slideshow because there were two. So I'm just looking at now, but if I'm looking at what she's done in you
would have downloaded the internal one, I'd say.
Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah.
So I would
awesome.
just noting for everyone, as externals, you would use the external PowerPoint because I actually change it and I tailor it specifically for you. But you would use the internal, you know how Jen's put up all of the activities to do and the readings, that would be in the general folder. But you guys are special. You actually have an external folder as well. And we get to do cool things like Padlets and, you know, lots of extra bits. So yeah. So as you can see, it's a little bit tricky. Like in the internal groups, when I was doing this, I'd laminated quite a few copies of the lesson plan so we could actually physically go around and have a look. But for those of you that do have access to it and can read it, is there anything else that you would like to add? What practices and actions have you noted?
I can add something from what I've just read. Basically, so looking at the way she's actually integrated quite a lot of external stimulus and more game orientated and engaging the students through a lot more kind of like there's a video here. Yeah, like it's full of different stimulus. Yeah, and it's just something that's going to engage the kids, because I think from previous practice, I've realized that kids just lose the attention span so quickly, and you need to just move on, like every 20 minutes or something different needs to occur, if not every 10, if you're doing a slideshow. So that was quite interesting.
Very good. So what you're saying is the use of multimedia, and that's something, you know, as 21st century learners, this is something that we need to do. We need to be engaging our students. And if you have a look, this is a 70-minute class. Engaging students for 70 minutes, you really are going to have to vary it. And another thing that we need to consider as well is there's been a lot of work done in this plan, but what if things aren't working? you really need to be able to adapt as well. You need to chop and change. You know, you may go over time in one area because students are really engaged, and you may not be able to finish. So you might have to think, okay, you know, it's like me if I'm doing a learning forum or a lecture and we get really involved in a particular discussion topic, and I look at the clock and, oh my goodness, I've got 5 minutes left. I have to suddenly think, what is it am I going to, what's the most important focus left that I want to do? I need to adapt it and think on my feet. And as teachers, as you become more experienced, that will become easier. But this beautiful lesson plan, it may not actually all get used. So some of the other things that I noticed, they've highlighted some really important things in different colours. They've really emphasised what I would call over-the-shoulder marking, walk around classroom, making sure students are on task, helping any students which may struggle. So they've actually put you know, prompts for themselves as well to remind themselves to do various things. So group
Angela,
work. Yes.
would
Frank?
this lesson plan be designed for herself or for like a substitute teacher or both?
That is a fabulous question. Thank you for asking that. A lesson plan, a really good lesson plan, is one that if as a teacher you are away, someone else would be able to take their class. But this student teacher wrote this lesson plan for themselves. So this is what they would use in their class, their teaching in a third year, as a third year student. But that's a really good point. So a good lesson plan is one that someone else would be able to implement. So something else that I liked here as well is the use of a balance of pedagogy. So there's group work, there's games, as you said, there's use of multimedia. They've got down the end here, there's a hands-on activity. Students will use the prompting questions to create a flow chart. So that's something that is really hands-on and practical for those kinesthetic learners, I guess, those and visual learners. But it's also a really important activity because it can assist the teacher to see what the students have actually learnt. And we call these exit tickets. Have you ever heard of that phrase? So an exit ticket is something that you would use as a teacher at the end of your lesson to do pretty much what it says, finish the lesson for the students to exit. And that would be to evaluate what the students have learnt, to see if your aims have been, so your the criteria, your objectives and your success criteria, if the students actually met those learning outcomes. So we're actually going to do an exit ticket at the end of this session. And I did one with the internals today as well. I got them on a piece of, on a post-it note to each write one practice that they learnt for the day, something different that they were not aware of before. So I've got all of those and I can see, okay, well, this is something that came through and that was one of my learning intentions, but no one actually mentioned this other particular area that I was wanting to focus on. So, you know, it's a really good way of evaluating that. Okay, so as we're going through, you know, with these prompts, I can see that some of you are adding notes as well, because we're going to use these discussions and some of these points to do a summary activity a little bit later after we've discussed all of the 3 stimuli. Anything else that anyone wanted to add before we move on to the next one? Okay. So this final stimulus was of a pre-service teacher and she was in her 4th year. This is a really interesting one to look at. I've actually used this a few times with students. What practices or actions did you see and hear. So remember, we're being objective and everyone's been using really good objective language so far. What did you see and hear?
I actually noticed her demonstrating and what she needed the students to do with plotting out the graph.
Yeah. So
where to put the dot.
Yeah. She was very clear with her objectives and also with the outcomes as well, what the success criteria would look like. That's a very good point. Very direct and clear instruction. Anything else?
I really liked how her classroom management, her behaviour, I thought that was really good. She didn't really pay attention to the students who were naughty, but then she also didn't disregard the students who were being good. They, you know, for asking questions, she did answer the question, which I would have found that to be quite hard.
You can see that this is a fourth-year student. And if you, I don't know if you noticed, but on the side there were 2 people taking notes. So she was being filmed and she had 2 people observing her. One was probably her supervising teacher. The other could have been the deputy principal, but she was also being filmed. And this is something that happens a lot, as I said, in classrooms, that peer observation and evaluation as well. And that's all about improving our practices. It's not about being judged. It's about us improving our practices. But I really liked the way you noted that she was ignoring that bad behavior to a certain extent and really putting that focus on the learning, which is what we saw in the first clip as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So she did note some behaviours, but she didn't make a big deal out of it. She put the child's, the student's name on the blackboard, and you know, you could even hear him talking in the background, making little comments. But did she react?
No. Well, it was something about a balloon. I think there was a balloon and she just put it away. She didn't make a big deal of it. He asked, when can I get it back? End of the day, he went and sat down.
Yeah.
That was it. Yeah.
So she didn't react to it, but she reacted on it, didn't she? She was really thoughtful in her approach. And I would imagine, this is just what I was thinking, but looking at her lesson, one of the things that was missing in the lesson plan was differentiation for individual students. And I would imagine that is something that she would actually really have considered, knowing that the group did have a few behaviour issues, that some of the students were a bit reactionary, and there were quite a few attempts by that student to distract the learning. And if she had placed too much emphasis on that, other students probably would have followed suit as well. Yeah. Anything else that anyone would like to add? There were quite a few good points in this one. What about the actual activity? Someone else?
I can't actually find this these slides like this. I have done the learning forum and the one for tomorrow's session as well, but I can't find the actual PDF versions with these slides in them.
So there isn't a PDF version. What it is, it's the PowerPoint. So if
yeah,
you go
the PowerPoint
into the external folder, you'll see the slides are on the clip. I've got, it actually states that, have other students been able to access it?
Yeah, Sharon, I think Sharon had the same problem as me about identifying which was the difference between the internal and external. So Sharon, if you go into the external folder, it's under week 2, and then it says week 2 PowerPoint is in that, under week 2 Zoom resources.
Going to external week 2 Zoom
resources, and then underneath
where it says Ange.
Yeah, that's where it is. Yeah.
Okay.
So
I'll
you just
see if this is the right one.
Yeah,
I think I had the wrong ones as well. Yeah.
So as external students, you would access the external Zoom material. So it's got all sorts of information in there. So as it says, each week you need to look at that PowerPoint prior to coming to the session, and there'll be activities listed on the first slide. I actually give you instructions of exactly what you need to do. And you may find that you will have to click enable to see the slides as well.
Yeah, I've just got it up now and it's showing 8 pages, but still not them pictures you've got up on your screen.
No, because this is different.
Oh,
this is my one. You need to look at your one. Yeah.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah, so you don't need to be actually looking at the slides on a device. You just need to be watching the slides on this particular PowerPoint. It's something you'll get used to it. Studying externally is quite different, but it is something that will take a little bit of time. I'm very happy if you want to send me an email through the week to talk you through it, or we can even have a phone conversation as well. Same with any of you. If this is your first time as an external student using the Zoom function, there's actually a video there as well that you would see in the external folder, which actually explains how to use Zoom and some tips and tricks as well. So for those of you that were able to access it, did you notice anything about, what did you think of the actual activity?
The game that she was playing with them, I thought that was very clever, especially for children that age. You could probably do it for younger children, but she, kept them interested. It's like bingo.
Definitely. Gamified learning, we refer it to.
What was that?
Gamified. It's gamified. So it's, really, she actually had the students' attention, the majority of them. So another thing that I think is important to note about this particular teacher is her great, very positive and confident body language. Did you notice that? And her use of nonverbals. That, I think, if she wasn't displaying that confident body language, I don't think she would have had quite the reaction from the students. It could have been much more negative than it was. And I could see that she really had developed the trust of the students as well, through, not falling for those attempts by some of the students to distract the learning. And she followed through too, didn't she? So she didn't just threaten to put the student's name on the board or for detention. She actually did it. And that is a very important strategy with behaviour management to follow through. Okay, anything else? Okay. So reflecting on the actions and the considerations of each of the 3 stimuli, I'd like you to now take a moment. I'd like you to get a piece of paper and to take a moment to individually compare and contrast the 3 stimuli. So we did mention a few things. So I want you to look at what is similar in all 3 examples of the teacher practice. So one of the things, I guess, would be the consideration. It was very, all of the examples, the practices include being clear planning and structure. And I guess another one was engagement with students. But I'll give you a few moments to those. So there are 3 points. What is similar in all 3 examples? What is similar between the 2 group examples? So the clips, I want you to look specifically at the 2 clips. So those 2 teachers, what are some of the similar practices that they were involved in? So I guess one of them is positive reinforcement. I'm going to get you to think of the others. And then the third point, the third and final point that I want you to consider is I want you to think about the lesson plan. what is it about the lesson plan? What is unique or different about it? You know, you could just discuss some of the points, think about some of the points that we discussed, you know, clear success criteria and learning intentions. So the use of Walt and Wilf, step by step and detailed. So just take a moment to to work on that. We just want to compare and contrast. Those of you at home who are, well, you're all at home, but those of you who are listening to the recording and watching the recording, you can do this exercise too. Okay, so just by doing a little bit of over the shoulder zoom marking, looking at some of your cameras, a few of you are still writing. So I'm going to give you a few more moments just to tidy up, and then we're going to discuss as a group. Now, those of you who haven't had the opportunity to talk yet this evening, I'd like you to share what you have reflected on and written. So a few more moments. Okay. So who would like to go first for that first question? What is similar in all three examples of teacher practice? What did you note?
Can I go? I know I've talked quite a bit. Oh, yeah. If someone else wants to go, that's fine.
No, you go first and then someone else can follow on.
Okay, all right. I think the main thing that was quite similar is they all use a bit of a range of learning, I guess, tools, and I guess you could touch on pedagogies. And they're also all very direct and clear in the lesson's intention and what the students should be engaging in. There's no kind of veering off on or different tangents. So that's what I found.
No, that was a very, very good point, Paris. Yeah. So all of them had a balance of pedagogical approaches. So different methods used, different ways of differentiating for individual students, especially, I guess, in the lesson plan where we talked about the use of multimedia. I guess in terms of the small group and the whole group, it was, you know, small group or whole group, but the lesson plan really did show that use of a balance of approaches. Okay, anyone else like to add something? Maybe one more point about something similar in all three examples?
I noticed. Oh, sorry, yep. Frank, you go.
Okay, you can go next, Paula.
Frank, then Paula. Yeah.
I've got similar points. I've just got that both were very direct and clear. They were both confident and focused on good behaviour.
Yeah. Focused. Yeah. So I guess the focus wasn't on the behaviour as such. It was more on the learning, wasn't it? That was what was really that shone through. Yeah. Thank you, Frank. Anyone else? Paula?
Oh, I was just going to say the prior learning, but I'm not sure whether that happened in the small group actually, but I know
it's hard to tell, but I would definitely imagine that looking at the way she was interacting with the students, that would have been a consideration, especially with the, you know, I guess when you are working in very small groups like that, it's usually you have some pretty clear objectives in terms of for individual students. So breaking them down into those groups, differentiating the individual students, whereas the whole group, if we compare the small to the whole, which will we can start doing now, there just wasn't quite the opportunities for differentiation, was there?
No.
Okay, so moving on to the similarities between the two clips, the two teachers, what did we note? What were some similar practices that they used?
Okay, what about that's okay?
Yeah, sure. And then we might have Ashley after that. Ashley?
Okay. Okay, I'll say one. Both of them in a real life setting in a classroom, so it's more realistic, whereas the plan it's not going to go exactly like that because you're going to have kids interrupt or something like that. So that was, it was in a real life setting.
Yeah, definitely. Good one. Ashley?
I suppose they were both quite organised and they knew how they wanted to run their plan, which I guess makes it like a smoother transition with the learning for the children. Yeah. I guess it would be worse when you go into a classroom and the teacher is sort of stumbling over what she wants to sort of get across to the room, whereas the teachers were able to sort of go from A to B smoothly.
Yeah. So there were lots of very purposeful, detailed considerations, weren't there? A good point. Anyone else? One more before we move on to specifically about the lesson plan. Matt, did you have anything that you wanted to share?
Sorry, I couldn't find the unmute button.
No worries.
I guess it's easier to see in the real life classroom as well, rather than the fake one, that the teachers engaging with the students and making sure that they're following along as well. With the small group, it's very easy to focus on individuals. And on the large group, she did it to an extent, but it was much more about wrangling, but you still get that one-on-one interaction.
Yeah, there was a bit of wrangling involved. I think one of the things that I noticed for her is the teacher in the maths class is that her safe space was definitely the whiteboard. Would you agree? She didn't really, a lot of teachers, would move around the room and do a bit of over the shoulder marking, as was discussed in the lesson plan, but she really didn't move from that area much, did she? She kind of went out a little bit to assist a few students, but she didn't really move around the room. Reasons for that, we don't actually know what they are, but we can't really judge her on that because we need to just look at what we saw and what we heard. We can't really make any judgments on why she chose to sort of stay in the front of the classroom. Okay, finally, the lesson plan. Anything that you wanted to note about the lesson plan, Matt? Something unique or different about it?
It was sort of seen in the other system, but I think more so in the lesson plan was kind of throwing the kids into a state of problem solving, trying to get them to answer something with one, and kind of in the second one, but I don't think to the same extent
in the lesson plan. Okay, yeah. I think as we discussed before, that with the hook, sometimes that is used to establish prior knowledge. So you'd have a hook, something about the particular topic, and then ask questions of the students about what they thought about it or what their prior experiences might be.
It was more that there's a section on the second page where even the teacher write down itself that the students aren't supposed to know.
Okay.
Yeah, on the second one. Yeah, it was an intentional throwing them into a situation that they don't know and then providing the response.
Yeah, sorry. I don't think I listened to you properly.
Sorry.
Thank you. No, I get that completely. Okay, someone else. Susie, anything that you came up with?
She really differentiated well. She listed out about student A needing certain help and student B needing a worksheet that was already pre-filled out.
Yeah.
To some extent. Okay,
good. Very clear success criteria and learning intentions too. So step by step, very detailed. Really structured. But as I said before, chances of getting all of those activities done would be pretty slim, I think. So even in that 70-minute time frame. All right, thank you so much for sharing your considerations. Appreciate that. So what I want to do now is just to break down and have a little think about the tasks that we actually have done this evening. So a bit of a teacher think about what we did. What do you think, in what ways did tonight's class relate to students' needs, interests and learning goals? So when I say students, I mean you. We've got how many? 14 of you here still. How did the activities relate to your needs as a first year student coming into your teaching degree with fairly minimal experience? Sharon?
With the lesson plans and actually watching teachers in action if you don't already have access to that within a classroom, if you're not already working in the industry.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
I think it gives you some different ideas on what can actually really happen in the classroom. And you can have this really nice plan on paper, but sometimes it doesn't go according to plan. Depending on what's going on the day with the students and things like that. So I think it's really relevant to see real life experiences. To just give you some context.
Yeah, a good point. Anything else?
Just to help, I often ask questions just to help guide me through it, like I spoke to you tonight. like about asking why certain things are and being new to all this. So just getting guidance and support, I guess.
Oh, definitely. I think having the in a Zoom session, there are some limitations, but I also think it's quite an intimate and focused group as well, that we are able to sit and think about it in the comfort of our own homes as well. So that is a factor and a good point. Thank you.
Okay.
I think one of the other areas as well is looking at teachers, beginning teachers, like in their first year, later on in their third year, and then in their final year as well, looking at the variation and I guess the levels of confidence and competence as well, that to consider as very beginning teachers, that it really is a journey, and with more experience and knowledge, your skills and your practices and your understandings are just going to improve so much each year, and especially with that experience that you're going to have on placement. So what about the Venn diagram? What do you think the purpose of the Venn diagram? So we went from list to brainstorm and then to the Venn diagram. What was the purpose of that?
I would say trying to target people's different learning styles, because I know for a fact, like personally, I'm a visual learner and really need that kind of mind map kind of, really kind of spread it out, that kind of thing. So that was really good because, if you just have too much of one thing, then it all kind of meshes into one. So that was really good.
So it's staged, the list, the brainstorm, and then the Venn diagram. I love a Venn diagram because it really allows you to compare and contrast. And that's what we want to do as teachers, to look at those, compare and contrast the different practices used across the 3 year levels of the teachers, but also across the cohorts as well. So the early childhood and then moving into the secondary. So it was early childhood / primary and secondary as well. So, to see the compare and contrast and the variation. But I think one of the important things to point out is the similarities as well. There were so many similarities with those approaches and practices of the 2 teachers and the lesson plan example as well, across all 3 cohorts. And that leads us into the final point there. Why is it important to gain, what might you gain from watching teachers from other sectors? So from early childhood, primary and secondary. Why do you think that's important? Sue?
I think it gives us a nice balance on what to expect. We, being first year students, we might decide to move to other secondary or early years. So
yeah, and you may have to work across those fields as well. Surprisingly, I know several teachers that are secondary trained and end up especially if you're in a college situation where they teach P to year 12, there have been cases, many of them, where you have to be adaptable. Sue, thank you very much, Frank. Sue, you had you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think also because my area is secondary, it starts at year 7 now. So I think it's important to listen to what primary school teachers, how they're doing it. And I also love how primary school is more interactive, and I think we can do more of that in secondary as well, particularly with the lower years.
Yeah, definitely. I agree, Sue. It's, those age appropriate pedagogies, we can, looking at the small group work, the whole group work, differentiating for individual students, that's something that is common across all sectors. And also the language used as well. We can see, it's not just about ages, but it's about abilities as well. So ages and stages of children's development, their understandings. that's something that's really important, but also seeing where our students have come from, where they are and where they're going to. So as teachers, I guess we have to look at prior learning as well, which is another factor that needs to be taken be considered. Okay, thank you for sharing those. Now, the final activity that we're going to do within this Zoom is I want you to think about one of these particular provocations and have a think about it. And I'm going to ask some of you to share. So choose one and I'll give you a moment to think about it. It's a bit more of, higher order thinking here. Once you've had a think and you're ready to respond, feel free to unmute your mic and share your understandings.
I chose number 4, about practice or theory, which comes first. I believe that if you do a mixture, then it keeps kids more interacted, because sometimes doing the practice first keeps kids engaged, and then afterwards, they start questioning, why are we doing this? They actually start learning themselves through questioning what they're doing. So then afterwards, they can look back at what practice they did, and then they're able to answer their own questions in a sense.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Pat. Yeah, no.
Or you can do it the kind of more original way, I guess, where you go theory then practice. So it depends, I guess, what you're doing, really.
Yeah. What about if we think about yourselves as teachers, practice or theory? So moving into professional experience without any theory, how would that be?
I think theory is always good to, I guess you can be in a practical setting, and then once you get that theory knowledge, it kind of puts the pieces together in the puzzle, I suppose. Like, I work in a kindergarten room, so I guess stuff that I get from, I guess, just the 2 weeks here, I've gone, oh yeah, that makes sense. And like through other study that I've done, the theory is important, I guess, to cement why you do things in the room in a practical setting, I suppose. I don't know, that's what I think anyway. Yeah.
No, and Ashley, I'm an early childhood teacher as well. Early childhood teachers are very much focused on making links to theory. It's really important in our practice. We're always talking about Vygotsky or Piaget, aren't we? Yeah, and making those links to theory. But I think part of critical reflection is really about making those links to theory. So having evidence of, if we do have particular approaches that are important to us, looking to theory to provide evidence for why those approaches are important. And again, coming back to early childhood practice, we really do need to have the agency and the ability to discuss and to make our practices visible in early childhood, to talk about the reasons behind play-based learning and an approach, a balanced approach to practices. Would you agree, Ashley?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, like, I've already got my philosophy or like sort of down, like how I believe I would like to teach in a room, but I think that does come from having theory knowledge from doing like my diploma, then studying, like I did part of my nursing degree, which was all sort of tied in to what I do at the classroom.
So you would have looked a lot into child development theories as well. Yeah. So that I believe that practice and theory really do work hand in hand. You can't have one without the other, really, can you? Especially that theory. Okay, thank you very much for sharing.
So I selected that number 4 one as well. And I guess the only thing that I can add to it is it also depends on your contents and or your subject matter, on which one would come first.
Yes. Yep, a very good point, Frank. Thank you. Anyone else?
I selected number 2.
Yeah.
I think it's a very common misconception that teachers are the experts in the room. So like students will tend to throw a lot of questions because they just think teachers know everything.
Yeah.
Where really it's kind of like we're a portal with transferring knowledge, but also like teachers are trying to encourage the learning to the student, or make the student think outside the box, kind of like what you've got us doing in our Zoom sessions, you know. Yeah.
I don't see myself in so many ways as, I guess I'm a teacher, but I'm a facilitator of learning. I provide the resources, and especially in adult learning, it's all about the discussion and those opportunities to really think a little bit deeper, you know, to provide those provocations and the resources to have the conversations, and for us to really think, especially as teachers and beginning teachers, to think about the kind of teacher that we want to be. So really explore what that means. So our values, our beliefs, our prior experiences, and what that means as moving in to a career in teaching. Thank you very much for that point. That was wonderful. Shall we have one more, perhaps? Paula?
Oh, me?
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I was actually number 1. So I wonder if teacher education should just be about giving beginner teachers the necessary practical skills to teach well, and that is it. So I guess from that, it means just put them out there. Don't worry about the theory. Don't give them any background with theory and how to teach. Am I assuming that?
And there has been a bit of that discussion in the media, like teachers teaching as an apprenticeship.
Oh, really?
What do we think about that?
I don't know. I'm assuming with the apprenticeship there is theory behind it. Wouldn't there be? Is that what they're...
Well, I guess to a certain extent, but not quite as much as I would think is necessary, because that critical thinking, that discussion with your peers about teaching and reflecting on your practice is something that I think is critical. When we come back from your first placement, one of the big things will be unpacking those experiences. And so really breaking down the theory that we've been discussing and linking that to some of the things that you've observed in the classroom, and also some of the learning. So how you are looking at the students are learning. So lots of different learning styles. So, yeah.
I don't know.
Anyone else have any thoughts on that, on the teacher as an apprentice?
It sounds interesting because like apprentices are getting experience from working on site, and I mean we do a lot of placement already, so
you do.
I don't really agree that we would have to. I think the process that we're doing right now is a great way.
I think having that theory, having the support, the ability to really have those deep discussions in a learning environment. So I guess it gets back down to what I like to call the community of practice. So we really are sharing those experiences and a number of perspectives as well, because as I guess an apprentice, you're only in the one environment, aren't you? You don't really get the opportunity to look at lots and lots of different teaching settings. So when you go out on placement, you're going to go to lots of different settings. And so as, you know, kindergarten or prep, year 1, year 2, year 3, or year 6 to year, you know, primary school, and then in secondary as well. So you're going to look at lots of different rooms and lots of different teachers as well. So you'll be able to decide, you know, you might want to model some of those teachers' practices, or other teachers you may think, well, that's not something that I agree with at all. So yeah, there are many levels really, aren't there? Okay, now what I would like you to do is I've added a Padlet. So this is your exit ticket. When you say good night, I'd like you to go to the Blackboard site, so in the week 2 folder, and I'd like you to add one new practice that you learnt in this evening's learning forum. And our students who are listening to this recording, you're very welcome to go and do that as well. So go to the Padlet and add one new practice. Now I'm going to pause the recording, so everyone else in the Zoom session, please don't go away, but I'm going to pause the recording and say thank you very much for participating in the Zoom via recording. And please, next time you're welcome to join us. Thank you very much.